Okay, my name is Dr. Bongo Adi of the Lagos Business School. It is my distinguished pleasure to welcome all of you to this webinar on venturing into agribusiness in the post-COVID-19 Nigeria. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor of the Pan-Atlantic University, Professor Joanna Legido, and the Dean of the Lagos Business School, Professor Enase Okenedo, it is my honor and pleasure to welcome you to this webinar today. We also have the distinguished presence of the governor, the agricultural revolutionary governor of Kebbi State, His Excellency Atiku Bagudu, here with us. We are so pleased that he has made our time to be with us on this webinar today, despite his very busy schedule. Right, so what are we here for? In the face of dwindling resources of the Federation, we need to get back to where we started. And where is that? That is agriculture. I don't want to take your any length of time, but I would like us to do some exercise. I wanted to take you to a website, and that is what they call the Observatory of Economic Complexity. I want to share with you how we were in 1965, 1966, and how we are today. Now, what is that supposed to tell us? Just to stimulate our thinking and the conversation that we are going to have this morning. By 1966, we had a highly diversified economy. And you will see from what I'm going to share with you, how diversified our export profile was in 1965. And I would like you to compare that with what we have today in 2017, and then make your own decisions. Having done that, I would like to introduce the agenda, and then we'll proceed from there. So if you could look at your screen, you will see the export profile, or what we call the product space of Nigeria in 1965. What does Nigeria export? Do not pay attention to the total volume of export or the revenue from the export, but let's look at the diversification of our product portfolio. So you could see that we were good in crude petroleum exports. We are also very good in the export of diversified range of agricultural products, from cocoa beans to granules to palm oil to natural rubber. We had a highly diversified export profile, but that was in 1965. Now let's go back here, and then we will see what our export profile is like in 2017. Just bear with me just a little bit. You will have it, work it out. Okay, so this is 2017. We will build a visualization. Just a moment, it will load. Great. So what you now see is just a dark product space. What does that mean? We are no longer diversified. What we have now is simply crude petroleum export, and that's 80% of our exports. Now the question is, how do we go from here to where we were in 1965? And that is what this webinar is today. Because given the situation now, which we all are familiar with, so there is no point rehashing the obvious. The only path left for us is to go back to agriculture. We have everything that is required to be highly competitive in agriculture, to feed ourselves and feed the West African sub-region, the intercontinent of Africa, and also export to the rest of the world. How do we make that happen? That is the reason why we are gathered here today. And in order to lead us in that discussion, I want to bring the governor, as I introduced, who has been very revolutionary, because the volume of rice produced by Kebbi State has more than quadrupled over the period of 3-4 years since he's been governor. Massive. So he will address us first. And then after that, I will introduce my colleague at the Lagos Business School, the man who has been the director of the most innovative agribusiness management program in Africa, and he's the HOD of the Finance and Economics Department of Lagos Business School, Dr. Ikechukwu Kelikume. So he will take us into venturing into agribusiness in the post-COVID-19 Nigeria, stakeholders engagement. This man, he's a guru when it comes to agribusiness. He has formed so many agri-entrepreneurs in Nigeria over the past 7-8 years. So he will tell us what his experience has been and give us some tips on how to proceed. Then after that, my humble self will take you through PPPs and clusters in agribusiness, because clusters and PPPs have proven reputable in transitioning countries, especially in Asia and Latin America, from where they were to being highly competitive in agribusiness. Then we will listen to the Bank of Agriculture, ably represented by Kabira Damiu, the immediate past MD. And then we will have also the Bank of Industry, Mr. Leonard Kange, who is the General Manager, Large Enterprises. Of course, we will also like to listen to Dr. Omar Babandi, who will also address us on what the Federal Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development have been doing so far. So at each time, after each presentation, we will open the floor for question and answer so that we allow you to be very interactive. Remember, we are not here to castigate the government or to, or to talk about the past. We are here to chart a way forward. What can we do to improve the prospects of the country in agribusiness, where we have very evident comparative advantage? Thank you. So it is my pleasure now to introduce His Excellency, the Governor of Kebbi State, Atiku Bagudu. Your Excellency, sir.
Hello, good morning, everyone, and I hope everyone can hear me well.
Good morning.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay. First, let me start by thanking you for inviting me and congratulate the Lagos Business School for all it has been doing in mobilizing debate in a number of areas and stimulating the interest of the nation. And welcome all other participants, Leonard, Babandi, and others in this webinar. And you have introduced the topic as being what to do to get into agribusiness post-COVID 2019. And certainly this is a very, very important topic because the COVID challenge is real. And we pray that our country and indeed other countries in the world survive it as soon as possible and get rid of it. And most commentaries about it have shown that it's going to be, there's going to be permanent shift in the way countries relate with each other. Supply chains have been disrupted, and it is unlikely that any country will not be more keen about ensuring that it does not depend on others, particularly for its food security need. And that is an important element in the decision to invest in agribusiness. In any case, we should have done much more than we are doing. But again, that is by the way. What can we do better? The presentation about how we transited from a multi-commodity exporter to a dominant exporter of a single commodity is a story that summarizes part of the challenge we have faced. Because rather than crude oil helping us to do better in all areas, I think we narrowed for a long time the search for others and concentrated on crude oil. And this has affected everyone. The oil producing states have been affected because their potential in agriculture has been limited. When yesterday, Chidi of ICRC, who invited me to this, sent me a video of Netherlands. I quickly noticed that Netherlands, as many people will know, is smaller than the landmass of our south states. And these are states where from fishery, from aquaculture, fisheries and farming potentials of different crops, I'm sure just a part of Nigeria that can give Netherlands a run for its money if only we have used earnings from crude oil to simulate or to support the bigger opportunity that are there in the agricultural business, and ditto for the rest of the country. And so I think we should not be debating anymore the importance of diversifying or the importance of investing in agriculture. It's just to figure out and do it more because A, it makes sense. Every part of Nigeria can produce much more than it has been doing in as little as a season, and by so doing, provide platform for agri-processing. And this is what an evidence in the last 5 years when I was governor showed me how easy it is. We have seen yield increases in rice from small-scale farmers to large-scale farmers, increasing 5-fold, 6-fold, and this is across the country. And the Central Bank of Nigeria has appreciated this and has invested, and thank God we have Godwin Emefiele as the Central Bank, because he has appreciated the development, the critical development opportunity that agriculture represents. And together with institutions like Bank of Industry, Bank of Agriculture, they have been mobilizing more money and that's going into agribusiness. And the results is great. We, in 2016, we had a recession. The only sector that was growing was agriculture. And more than anything else, it was agriculture that led the way out of recession. And we have seen how easy it is with commitment by the President Buhari-led administration. Today, we have fixed the fertilizer problem. Fertilizer is no longer a cartel, it's a commodity. Many inputs have been sorted, and because of that, we are witnessing yields increases. We are witnessing companies going into agri-processing, even when they are reluctant to invest in other areas. And the President Muhammadu Buhari's decision to set up the National Food Security Council, where all elements of the policy decision making, the science, the environment, the security, the economics, the trade policy are brought together and chaired by the president himself, is an ambitious step to compensate for the failings of the World Trade Organization agreement, which has victimized agribusiness in countries like Nigeria, and to ensure that we calibrate our policies to protect and promote agribusiness in such a way that we are not unfairly exploited. According to the Organization of European Cooperation and Development, over OECD, over between 500 billion to 700 billion US dollars is given as producer and consumer support to agriculture by different countries, particularly the richer countries of the richer countries, and about 20% of price of agri-produce reflects such distortion. So to have a mechanism where a country can calibrate its policy to ensure that it provide adequate support to this evolving sector is very, very important. And I don't know how much time I have. One country that has always fascinated me, and which I thought we should look at as Nigeria, what Nigerians should look at is Bangladesh. Bangladesh has a landmass of less than 200,000 square kilometers, and was close to 170 million population. But yet, Bangladesh is able to produce over 30 million metric tons of rice, which even at $500 per ton is an output worth $15 billion. They do close to $4 million tons of fisheries. And the cotton industry, or rather the product industry that is supporting their textile sector, which exports about $34 billion worth of textiles, is enough evidence that we should do more, because 147,000 square kilometers is about one fourth and a half of Nigeria's land mass, and we don't even have that they have. And then we have the land structure, ecology, climate. So the missing link, I believe, is to appreciate that we need to put much more money consistently and into agriculture and calibrate crude oil been wonderful, but I think we got, and if we, as late, we can't, it's never late to start. And if we put more money into agriculture, we will continue to drive results. We will continue to achieve yield increases. We will continue to absorb so many people who want job. And we are a lucky country that each of our 36 states plus FCT has agricultural potential, be it in farming, be it in fisheries, be it in animal husbandry. So encouraged by what we have seen happen. Thank you. I believe this is the way, this is a major opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, His Excellency Atiku Bagudu. If you are joining us, this is the Venturing into Agribusiness post-COVID-19 Nigeria. This is a webinar organized in partnership with a number of government agencies. We've just had the governor of Kebbi State, His Excellency Atiku Bagudu, speak to us on the potentials inherent in Nigeria that we need to leverage in order to become very competitive in agriculture. So for this program today, we are partnering with, of course, the presidency under the Infrastructure Concession and Regulatory Commission, and we are pleased to have Engineer Chidi Izuwa, the Acting Director General, here with us. And it's actually his doing that we have been able to assemble all the ministries, all the public agencies that have agreed to partner with us on this program. We are so grateful to him. We also have the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. We have the Central Bank of Nigeria, the Nigerian Governors Forum, the Nigeria Incentive-Based Risk-Sharing System for Agricultural Lending, the Bank of Agriculture, the Bank of Industry, and the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. So you can see that this is a well-represented webinar. So it's an example of the public-private partnership that we are talking about. The LBS is a private organization, and then we are partnering with the government to bring this to all of us. So what do we need to do to position agriculture in the post-COVID Nigeria so that we can get back to where we used to be in the days before the Civil War in 1966 and 1965, when we had a highly diversified export portfolio. We have the potential, we have what it takes. So we just need to rejig our strategies so that we will get back to where we desire to be. So in order to take us further, I want to call the man who makes things happen in agribusiness, my colleague, Dr. Ikechukwu Kelikume, the HOD of Finance and Economics, and the Director of the Agribusiness Management Program of Lagos Business School. Dr. Kelikume, please.
Slide. Hold on, I'm coming.
Okay, great. Take your time.
So good morning all. And I want to begin by thanking His Excellency, the Governor of His Excellency, the Governor that just gave us a wonderful overview of the agricultural sector. Thank you, Bongo, for also giving that insight about the agricultural sector in the 1960s and even what the sector has become today. So it's a pleasure sharing at this time, venturing into agribusiness in the post-COVID-19 era. My name is Kelikume Ikechukwu. I'm the current agribusiness director, teaching agribusiness in the Lagos Business School. I'm also the head of the Department of Economics, Finance, and Accounting. I've been managing the agribusiness portfolio for the past 6 years. So this morning we'll be looking at venturing into agribusiness in the post-COVID-19 Nigeria. Again, we'll be looking at the state competitiveness and the role of the PPPs in agriculture. Before we start, I want to say, I hope we are all keeping safe. COVID-19 is real. We must stay safe and beat the virus. Just like every other virus that has affected mankind, this one will come and it will go. And by the grace of God, we will all be alive to tell the story. Well, I'm going to take you through some preambles because of the number of participants that we have here. I'll take you through the aim objective of this session, some preambles, some definitions for everyone to be on the same page. Then we'll look at COVID-19 updates and the agricultural sector. Again, we'll focus on the agriculture and agribusiness space. We'll look at the impact point of the COVID-19 pandemic. Then we'll look at state competitiveness. Are our states actually competitive in the things that they are currently doing in the sector? Specifically because of time, I narrowed it to 3 sectors: oil palm, rice, and sesame. So I'm going to be looking at the dynamics in cultivating oil palm, rice, and sesame. Sesame because sesame happens to be the leading crop, the leading export crop for Nigeria today. In the 1960s, it was oil palm, it was cocoa, it was cashew, it was cotton. Today, we're looking at the different dynamics in the agricultural space where we find sesame leading the pack in our country's exports. So Nigeria, like many countries in the world, is grappling under the adverse effects of COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, the world is expecting that we are likely to hit the recession worse than the 07-08 crisis. Latest figures released by NCDC is actually not encouraging, even with the easing of the lockdown. So far, Nigeria has recorded 3,526 confirmed cases, 107 deaths, and 601 recovery. Africa has recorded 52,175 cases, 2,024 deaths, and 17,819 recovery. Now, this tells us, remember when this whole thing started, Africa muted that this thing will not come to the black race. COVID-19 is here. May the Lord keep us from the adverse effect of this virus. So the adverse effect of COVID-19 is seen directly in the disruption of the global food supply chain. His Excellency alluded to this fact when he presented. Shocks in the international crude oil market, which has adversely affected prices of crude, the demand for and the supply of crude. It has affected it negatively. The shock impact of COVID-19 pandemic has triggered historical decline in real output growth, exposing the countries to large financing negative financing at the federal, state, and local government areas. So there's this challenge that states will not be able to, the allocation to states will actually be constrained because of the current price of our crude. Now, in response to all of this, Nigeria, IMF, actually approved a $3.4 billion loan soft loan to the country. The question is, for how long are we going to continue to borrow to finance this kind of crisis? COVID-19 pandemic calls for government and all stakeholders to begin to look inward for solutions, for home growth solutions to solve this kind of problem. This is why we are looking at the agricultural. The aim of this work on possible solutions post-COVID-19 Nigeria. Again, we have to look at the federal state competitiveness and the role of PPPs in driving sustainable agri solution to the over-reliance of oil and gas sector. So we are thinking of how do we move away from the over 90, 80, 85, 90% reliance on the oil and gas sector, diversifying the economy back to where we started from in 1960-65. So let us begin by examining some of the definitions. Agriculture, we know. Every time we hear people talk about agriculture, basically they are looking at farming. 80% of the time you hear people say they're going into agriculture, they're actually delving into farming. So this is simply defined as the practice of farming in crop production, in livestock, in fishery, and in forestry. So this is how the agricultural sector is disaggregated. Agribusiness is the business of agriculture, is the commercial part of agriculture. Every time you hear people say agriculture is the next gold mine, the actual truth is that it is not agriculture that is the gold mine, but agribusiness as the next gold mine. We can see this when you look at countries like, when you look at Cote d'Ivoire. Cote d'Ivoire is rich in the production of cocoa. However, Cote d'Ivoire does not appropriate much revenue from cocoa than Switzerland. Switzerland does not grow cocoa, but they make over 70% of the dividend from the cocoa value chain. The reason is not far. The reason is because they have integrated in the agribusiness space where they've added significant value to cocoa. Competitiveness. This is the ability of countries or states to offer goods and services that meet local and international standards at the least prices and providing adequate returns to factor inputs. It means that land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur can earn significantly when they venture into this space. Competitive advantage. These again are factors that allow a country or state to produce goods and services cheaper than other competing states or countries. So this comes in the form of comparative and differential advantage. So when we say comparative advantage, we're looking at a country or state or firm's ability to produce goods and services more efficiently than its competitors. If you look at what Kebbi State is doing today, prior to the rice initiative, significant boost in the rice initiative, the yield for rice in Nigeria was less than 2 tons per hectare. And we heard the governor say they're now doing, between 5 and 6 tons per hectare. Competitive advantage. A country or state's or firm's ability to produce goods and services more efficiently than its competitor. And that's exactly what is happening in Kebbi today, that they are showing up the yield of rice production. The reason is that if you do not show up the yield for production of rice, you're going to be competing with imports. Differential advantage. This is the ability of nations or states or firms to produce unique and superior quality products, thereby adding significant value in the produce as it is coming out. So one thing you're going to find is that Nigeria is good at cocoa, at cashew nut production. But when you look at value add to cashew, Nigeria is not yet there in the production of quality cashew nuts that is not broken. When cashew nuts are broken, it cannot be sold in the international market. So you have whole nut cashew proficiently produced before you can actually sell it in the international market. So examples of the usage of competitive advantage will help us tune this discussion further. In 1961, Nigeria was the world leading producer of oil palm fruits, producing about 6.75 million metric tons ahead of Indonesia and Malaysia. Then Indonesia and Malaysia, they were actually doing 935,500 metric tons. So we're looking at 1961, post-independence. So data from FAO stats shows that in 2018, Nigeria produced 7.85 million metric tons. Now, can you see the difference between 1961 and 2018? 6.7, we grew marginally to 7.8 million metric tons. Indonesia actually did 115.2 million metric tons, whilst Malaysia did 98.4 million tons of palm oil fruit. Data from MBS, Foreign Trade Statistics, shows that Nigeria actually imported palm oil from Malaysia, Singapore, India as at end Q2 2014. So you can see a country that started as the dominant force in palm oil, now importing palm oil related products in 2019. How do we explain this? What has happened to the palm oil industry in Nigeria? The answer lies in uncompetitiveness. That was why I started by defining competitiveness. It actually lies in the uncompetitiveness of the Nigerian palm oil industry. So let us digress a bit by looking at, I'm going to take questions midway. Let us digress a bit by looking at the post-COVID-19, the issue that brought us here, which is the post-COVID-19 update. Where exactly are we? And how does this relate to the agricultural sector? If you look at the chart above, you will see that the numbers are spiking, which is also very frightful. If you look at the global cases and deaths and the Nigerian COVID-19 cases and deaths, you can see similarity in terms of the spike. The ratio of deaths, however, remains low compared to the world ratio. So you're looking at the 6.9% if you look at the global, whilst for Nigeria is 3.3%. The comparative analysis with other African countries tells the true picture. We'll see that in the next slide. So the current trend shows that there's similarity in the pattern in which this thing is moving globally. So NCDC must improve awareness campaign and testing. Some people are still moving around thinking that this is child's play, that there's no such thing as COVID-19. If you look at this data, it actually shows us where we are in terms of total tests. You can see the color where we are in terms of total tests, comparing Nigeria with other African countries and placing US on top of it. Now, you can see that Nigeria has done, Algeria is the least in terms of test case, whilst Nigeria is the next. Currently, we have tested 22. So this data was collected on May 6. So as at May 7, we've surpassed 19,000 tests. We've done about 22,000 tests. So Ghana, South Africa has done more testing than Nigeria. The ratio of the number of deaths to total cases for Ghana, South Africa is 0.7% and 1.9% respectively. For Nigeria, it is 3.3%. Algeria has the lowest testing and the highest death ratio for the recorded cases. So if you look at Algeria, you'll see that they've done limited tests. So it appears that the more testing and the increased awareness campaign, the lower will be the number of deaths. So if we do more, intensify and increase the number of testing, we're likely to reduce the number of deaths. If we increase the awareness campaign of how we can prevent this thing from spreading, we're likely to reduce and minimize the number of deaths. So why the focus on the agricultural sector and the agribusiness sector? Why is everyone suddenly interested in the agricultural sector? Why is the strong agribusiness sector seen as a game changer for the African continent? Agriculture is the only sector that is closely tied to meeting the basic needs of man, such as food, shelter, health, wellness, medicine, clothing, raw materials for the industrial production. If you look at the likes of Nigerian breweries, you probably will hear the story of Nigerian breweries integrating into cassava. The TME 419 cassava was a very good resource for MDL, Nigeria, during the last recession. So according to Bill and Melinda Gates, investment in agriculture are the best weapon against hunger and poverty, and they have made life better for billions of people. Without agriculture, we are all dead. Again, Nigeria has a very young population that must be fed. 43% of our over 200 million population lies between the age grade 0 and 14. And you know what these people eat? Cereal. And cereal is related to maize, millet, sorghum. Agriculture employs about 37% of the Nigerian 90.4 million labor force. So this tells you the importance of the agricultural sector in terms of provision of food, in terms of medicine, in terms of health and wellness, in terms of housing. Agriculture plays a key role. Again, when you look at the data, if you look at that number, agriculture employs about 37% of the Nigerian 90.4 million labor force. That is a problem in itself, because every country where you find such increase in the number of players in the agricultural sector, that country is actually regarded as a poor country. So if you see my slide, you probably will see Canada. USA is number one. USA currently has about 1.66% of its labor force engaged in the agricultural sector. Canada has 1.95% engaged in the agricultural sector. When you look at our neighbor, South Africa, it has 5.55% of its population engaged in the agricultural sector. So what this data tells me or speaks to is that agriculture is big business. Agriculture is big business. Hence, we must begin to look at how to attract multinational corporations, investors into the agri. Again, why are we so keen about the agricultural sector? The agricultural sector is
Hello, sir. You need to check your mic. We've lost you. We can't hear what you've been saying in the past 1 minute.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, yes, you're back on. Thank you very much. Maybe you go back to that slide.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
So this slide. So like I said, Nigeria has a very young, vibrant population, and this population must be fed. 43% of our over 200 million population lies within the age grade 0 to 14. That's meaning you have about 90 million people as children, youth. Again, meaning that the dependency ratio is very high. If there's any disruption in food supply, it's going to lead to social unrest. It's going to lead to crisis beyond crisis that will be.
We lost you again. We're waiting for you to get back on. please bear with us. I think this is the network challenges that we have no control over. Okay, just a minute, he will be back. Hello? Okay, if you can hear me, you can also have, okay, great. So take off your, oh, I hope he hasn't gone. Okay, let's just give him a couple of seconds. He'll be back on. I think it's a network connection. You know, it happens with Zoom. Sometimes it trips off because of network, you know, instability. So we hope that he's going to be back on with us. Meanwhile, we've got a number of questions, quite a huge number of questions. A lot of people are putting, you know, questions. So if you have any question, you know where you need to reach on Zoom, Q&A. So you go there, put your question, and then we will try as much as we can to address some of them, because for lack of time, there is no way we can address all the questions. So like I said, in between, we'll be taking some questions. So I'm going to try to see if there are some questions that can be answered by any of the government agencies that are partnering with us on this program, so that we can take it while Dr. Kelikume sorts his internet out. Okay, Mrs. Okwe Oteri, do we have you been able to look at the questions? Are there ones that we can take right now? Hello, Okwe. Unmute yourself, please.
Hello, yes, please.
Okay, great. So which questions do you have for us?
Okay. Good morning. The first question is, the COVID pandemic surprised us all in all sectors of human endeavor, and food security was an area that we were exposed as a country. How do we ensure there is a continuous flow of produce from farmers to our homes, as farmers suffered monumental losses during the pandemic? Did you get that?
Yes, I get that question. I think this, let's look at, I would like Mr. Leo Kange of the Bank of Industry to, you know, look into this question. The participants want to know, what can we do to ensure that there is no disruption? Because we know that this happened in 07, 08, you know, when we had the global financial meltdown. So following that, immediately was the spike in food prices the world over. And then it has also been said that we are likely to witness similar situation current period, even worse, because of the lockdowns in different countries. So think of rice, for instance. I read something yesterday in the case of Nigeria. You know, 57% of our consumption of rice is made by domestic production. That leaves out 43%. Now, the lockdowns has meant that most farmers have not been able to go to their farms. So if they are going to the farm, the logistics have been interrupted. We can also expect that that has happened at the international side of things. So imports will also be has been disrupted as well. So how do we meet, you know, in the interim, you know, the supply, the demand, the local demand for instance, rice? Dr. Leo Kange, so is there anything by the Bank of Agriculture? Is this something that you think we can resolve quickly?
Well, thank you very much. Sorry, but my name is Leonard Kange. I'm not a doctor, please.
Don't worry, sorry.
Okay.
So you can take that.
Yes. It's a very, very valid question. It's an excellent question. It's something that has been on the mind of the Bank of Industry quite ever since this COVID-19 started. The key challenge that we are trying to address is to continue to focus on our customers that are processing agricultural products like rice, maize, etc. And what we have done at the Bank of Industry is to provide palliatives to these customers by way of reducing interest rates, by way of providing restructuring of their credit facilities, essentially trying to reduce the financial impact, and also supporting them to continue to increase production capacity in terms of one, acquiring the produce from the farms, and ensuring that they continue to ramp up their production to meet the gap that we expect is already happening, and help to also reduce the prices. We're also looking at the logistics of it, how to get the produce from the farm to the processors and then to the market as well. We're looking at the logistics as well, trying to see how we can support that to ensure that we continue to have continuous flow of produce, less post-harvest wastage, and also help to lower the prices. That is how Bank of Industry is working to ensure that we keep the supply of agricultural produce coming in, and also to reduce the prices that customers will be facing, because this is an area that we're really concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leonard. That's a very good intervention. Okay, so the point you made on price is very important, because I think that is what is going to kill off so many people. Because given the scarcity that we're going to experience, we've seen that already. Because in March, the Bureau of Statistics published the Consumer Price Index and the inflation rate, which has gone up to 12.2%. So I'm sure by now we are looking at inflation of up to 15%, and it will keep worsening, as these disruptions continue. So it's important to put in place some measures to ensure that we do not have, uncontrollable price hike, because that would damage the economy even more. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, the Bank of Agriculture, Mr. Bikoye, if you're there with us. Hello, Mr. Bikoye? Bank of Agriculture. Okay, while we wait for him, okay, could you please read us the next question that we can address? Please unmute yourself. Hello, can you unmute yourself? Thank you.
How do we deal with insecurity confronting farmers and their farmlands as armed gangs now move in to harvest the farm produce before they even mature? How do we stop armed herders from rampaging farms and destroying the crops?
That's a powerful question. I think it's a serious matter. Your Excellency, if you are with us, we would like to hear your experience on this. How have you been able to manage insecurity in the farms and been able to protect your rice field from invaders? Please unmute yourself, Your Excellency.
Insecurity, hello?
We can hear you. Great.
Insecurity is no doubt an issue in agriculture, and particularly these are challenges we have faced in a little bit over a decade across the country. So, and no part of Nigeria, there's no part of Nigeria that has not been affected. But what we did since 2015 was to recognize that the safest way, the best way to build security is to include everyone. Sometimes we invest in farming to the detriment of the livestock sector. Sometimes we put more money without being mindful also of the need to invest in others. For example, the pastoralist population, because Kebbi has a big pastoralist population. We recognize that if we are investing in the farming sector, then they occupy land longer than they used to be. And therefore, we have to also be conscious about what to do to the pastoralist sector so that they are not otherwise put in a disadvantaged position. So we also put money to support them with water so that they can be more stationary, to support them with feed, and to even help the women who market the milk to be able to process it into yogurt that will take longer. And it's the same thing, the fishing community has to also be incorporated, because once freshwater bodies are disappearing, you also have to say, okay, what can we do for the fishing sector? And by and large, we have received, the federal government, the security agencies have increased the capacity and support to ensure that insecurity is dealt with, because there will still be criminal element even after that is done. But I feel each state needs to recognize that various competing land use and try to balance it. You can't get it right 100%, but try to balance it. And it can reduce together with security agencies will handle most of the other issues.
Very much, you are excellent. So, in summary, it is important to put the headers into consideration in any policy design, okay, to make sure that get them to become more sedentary. So that's a very
Yes.
thing, and then it's a very important thing that we need to do. It's critical. Otherwise, we continue to have a disruption. Even after COVID-19, we continue to register disruption in the agricultural value chain as a result of the farmer headers conflict. That's a very serious matter. I wish that we can delve into that more. We have the immediate past MD of the Bank of Agriculture, Kabir Adamu. He has joined us, so I'm sure that he's been listening. I don't know if he has anything to say to address that we're talking about. The first is on the price hike. How do we ensure that the disruptions do not create unnecessary price inflation? And the second one is on the insecurity. I think this is better tackled from the policy angle, which is what the public sector brings to the table today. So Kabir Adamu, if you are with us, we want to hear you. Okay, it seems he's not yet ready. Okay, okay, give us the next question, please.
Okay. How do we ensure credit is available and accessible to all players along the credit value chain, especially smallholder farmers?
Okay, that's another important matter for agricultural sustainability. Access to credit, access to finance. We have the Bank of Industry, we have the Bank of Agriculture. So let's start with the Bank of Industry. So Leo, this first again on your table. Access to credit. Great.
Thank you very much. Bank of Industry, agriculture and agribusiness represents a large percentage of our loan portfolio. Why? Because Bank of Industry's focus is to ensure that we support industries that have capability of generating employment, reducing poverty, etc. And agriculture, as we know, is a huge employer of labor and also can help to add significant value and increase wealth. that of the farmers and everybody along the value chain. Bank of Industry's support in the agricultural sector cuts across all the various levels of the value chain. We start with the large enterprises. We also look at the SMEs as well as the micro enterprises. The question referred to smallholder farmers. Bank of Industry, in terms of our mandate, we are not allowed to provide financing for primary agriculture. That is the area that is covered by Bank of Agriculture. However, because Bank of Industry supports large enterprises and micro SMEs, sometimes we support their efforts to ring-fence their supply inputs. We support them to like aggregators, processors, and manufacturers who want to ring-fence their material supplies and ensure that the produce gets to them so that they can process. Because our focus is on food processing, helping to agri-processing, helping to process the products. And so that is how Bank of Industry is able to support the smallholder farmers. So we have the aggregators, we have the processors, we have the manufacturers. We provide financing to them. They aggregate the farmers, the smallholder farmers, and allocate land to them. They provide seedlings, they provide fertilizer, they provide knowledge, they provide all kinds of technical knowledge, etc., to ensure that the yield is high. And at the end, they provide, they take, once the harvest is done, they take a percentage of the harvest, usually about 40, 50, 60%, and for their own processing needs. And that is how the farmers are able to pay back their loans to those enterprises. We do not deal directly with them, but we deal with the aggregators, the processors, and the manufacturers. And the balance of the produce or the harvest is now left in the hands of the farmers for them to now sell on the open market. And this is how they're also able to generate wealth for themselves and also expand their capacity to continue to produce. So that is how Bank of Industry is able to support smallholder farmers. But like I said, our intervention is at all levels of the value chain, from that level all the way to the medium and the large enterprises. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Leo. While we are waiting for Kelikume to rejoin us because he has interruption with his network. So I would like to start my own presentation, which is on PPPs and cooperative clusters in the agribusiness innovation architecture. And that is following from what Leo Kanga of the Bank of Industry has mentioned. He talked about aggregators, he talked about processors and farmers, how they support aggregators, who in turn, have to bring together, cluster the farmers into cooperatives, because that is just about bulk consolidation of products and agricultural products, so that they could achieve some scale, and then export and for domestic uses. So, and that brings us to what PPPs can do and what clusters can also do. Now, there is a question here that someone has asked, which is about why is it Brazil, that is something that's been flying about. Brazil makes almost 10 times our budget for 2020. That was Brazil's agricultural revenue, export revenue, in 2019. They have almost 10%, 200% of our budget from agriculture alone. So the question is, how have they managed to do that? Now, if you go to FAO and so many international agricultural organizations, they are always pointing out Latin American countries and Asian countries for their innovation in agribusiness. And of course, we know in Nigeria that the bulk of the rice imports, that we have to get in order to meet our local consumption need comes from Malaysia and so many other Asian countries. We also, Kelikume was also talking about the oil palm value chain. There was a time when Malaysians came here to take our oil palm seedling. Today, they have become the world's largest producer of palm oil. Meanwhile, we have recessed, as you could see from the slide, that product space that I shared in the beginning. So how have these countries, the Latin American countries, the Asian countries that have proven to be highly competitive in the agribusiness value chain, how have they managed to achieve that competitiveness within a very short period of time? Now, the reasons are the deployment of clusters, essentially. Now, so in my presentation, I want to look at what are the chances, what are the possibilities, what are the prospects for public-private partnerships in agriculture. Now, we know that something like that has started. We know about the AXMIS of the central bank. We know about the Anchor Overalls program as well, and so many other incentives that the government, the CBN, through the central bank, have put together in recent times to boost agricultural production, especially agribusiness, to enhance the agribusiness value chain. But I think that more needs to be done. Yes, it's a good thing that we have the ICRC who has actually put these things together with LBS today. And then the director is also here with us. So at the end, he'll be speaking to us on the role of PPPs as well. But then looking at PPPs and cooperative clusters. Okay, I think Kelikume is back. All right, so I will relax my own presentation and allow him to finish up, then I'll continue because I will need to also leverage from what he says. So if you're back with us, Kelikume, could you please share your slide and continue?
I'm coming.
Okay, great, thank you very much.
Can you see it? Are you seeing it?
For it to come up, it will. Have you shared it with us? I'm not yet seeing it.
I'm coming.
Okay, but you can continue your discussion, continue your flow while your slide comes on so that we don't have any interruption.
Okay, can you see the slide?
Not yet.
Let me try again and connect it.
Share screen.
I'm trying to share.
Okay.
What's happening?
Relax, take it easy, it will work. It happens sometimes.
Wow. Why is he asking me to join back?
You're here already, we can see you.
Wow.
Okay, let me continue with my presentation then.
Just continue. When I get it right, you
great,
continue.
That's fine. Fine, so we're talking about PPPs and cooperative clusters in the agribusiness innovation architecture. So what is the role for PPPs? Where do we need to bring in private partners? Where do we need to bring in a public-private partnership? So I've got my slide here that I'm going to share with you, but I'm not going to speak into the slides, but I'll be talking generally. And then please interrupt me with any question that you may have along the way. Okay, I hope you can see my slide. Okay, PPPs and cooperative clusters. So I was talking about Latin American countries and the Asian countries, and I was referring to Brazil that have achieved tremendous success in agricultural exports over the past few years. Not just Brazil, we also talk about Chile. Now, what have these countries done? It's about clustering. Because if we look at it, yes, they've got land mass just as we have in Nigeria. But what's different? They also have a concentration of smallholder farmers. So we have smallholder farmers, meaning that their productivity, their yield, okay, the volume of production at the individual farmer level will not make any dent when it comes to export, even for domestic consumption. So for you to make any, achieve any milestone, it is important to, first of all, get them together. So this is what they have done over the years. So the Harvard Business School has done so many cases on the wine clusters in Argentina, the wine clusters in Brazil, the wine clusters in Chile, the wine clusters in Ecuador, in Colombia. And then, so over the years, they have achieved tremendous success in agglomeration economics. Agglomeration is exactly the advantage that clusters convey to smallholder farmers. By co-locating them together, bringing them all together, they are able to increase the volume of what they produce. And then how have they been able to do that? It is through public-private partnerships. Okay, so like I said, we have the doyen of PPP here with us, Engineer Chidi Izuwa, so I don't pretend to know more than him about PPPs. So he regulates PPPs in Nigeria. But then we know that PPP is a mechanism for improving the delivery of public goods and services by partnering with the private sector while retaining an active role for government to ensure that national socioeconomic objectives can be achieved. That is what PPPs are. So it is not every infrastructure or every business that is amenable to PPP. Some are not. Okay, PPP works best when we know that the government alone or the private sector alone cannot achieve, especially the socioeconomic objective. And then it has to do with the nature of incentive. And we've seen that beginning to manifest even in the agricultural value chain. Okay, we have seen a lot of schemes over the past 3-4 years that the CBN has launched. Okay, so with different degrees of success. So one of the things that some people think militate against that is that people are beginning to see that as grants coming from government, money that they don't have to pay. If you follow the news recently, even before COVID-19, you will know that the Anchor Borrowers Program was said to have been made in some corruption and all of that. Not corruption as such, but that borrowers have not been able to pay back. Why is that the case? Because of incentive issue. Whenever it is coming from government, whether from CBN or from the Ministry of Agriculture or from the Bank of Agriculture or Bank of Industry, there is the tendency for people to see that as a kind of a subvention or grant coming from government. But is it possible to change that in such a way that we bring private sector participation, which will bring private sector interest? Because private sector interest is always about maximizing efficiency as well as maximizing profit. Why maximizing profit? The interest of the government should be there to ensure that the socioeconomic objective of poverty alleviation and the increase volume of food production, so that is the reason why PPP is more suitable for our agribusiness strategy in Nigeria. Now, that has started, but we still need to go faster and further in quickly as possible. Because if from all I can tell, ICRC has facilitated so much. We know about the silos that have been built in almost all the states of federation. Okay, there are different levels of concession. Now, most of them have been concession actually. So that's a huge achievement. A lot's ongoing, but we still need to do so much more. How do we now bring in, because I opened this up for discussion, especially among the government agency and the individuals who are listening to us, people who have tried to venture into agriculture in the last few years and have achieved major success. Now, how do we build a framework that will help to react private sector funding, private sector expertise, private sector resources, and private sector participation in the agribusiness value chain? Now, if you look at it, there is no aspect of the value chain that PPP cannot work. Whether it is, if we're looking at land use policy, because that's also been a mitigating factor in Nigeria. So when we talk about the challenges towards agricultural development, one of the number one point that everybody points to is the land use policy. Okay, so it is important that that be addressed as quickly as possible, because everybody cites it as an impediment to agricultural development. And except we handle that efficiently, we cannot hope that we will get the much needed private sector investment in agriculture. So along the value chain of agribusiness, there is no point that we should not have PPPs. Whether it is an input supply, or primary production, or storage, or processing, or market access, or export. All of these segments are very, very amenable to public-private partnership, to public sector and private sector participation. So we can see that there's huge opportunity there. So to collaborate or to facilitate or promote collaboration between the private sector and the public sector to increase yield, increase productivity, and of course, begin to hit the export market. That is the most important thing. How do we increase the export value? Okay, if you go back to the slide I showed, what I showed, that website, you could see the difference between our product space today and our product space in 1966, 1965. We were highly diversified along the agricultural value chain. Oil was there, but it wasn't our main export. It was just 29%. But today, 2017, 2018, 19, 20, oil is almost exclusively our export. Agriculture is just beginning to make a marginal dent, not significant. How do we increase the agricultural component of our exports? That is the question we need to ask, because that is what other countries are doing. Now we have enormous capacity, we have enormous potential to make this happen. And that is where our competitive advantage lies. Not in high tech, because we don't have that human capital, we don't have the technology, but we can do this in agriculture at the possible time. Now, how do we get this to happen? So that is a question that we need to address, okay? Now that takes me to agribusiness clustering. All of America, this is the preferred model. FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, cites it also as the best way to increase not only the yield, but quality, the volume, and also the market presence of agriculture and agribusiness in the world today. Now, how do we begin?
Sorry, Dr. Bongo. Please,
yes?
can you do a slideshow? We are not seeing the full screen.
Oh, you can't see the full screen?
Yes.
Oh, hold on.
Bongo, when you're ready, I'm up.
Okay, so let me finish my presentation. I'll be done. Can you see it now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So agribusiness clustering is simply a concentration of producers, agro-industries, traders, and other private and public actors engaged in the same industry and in building value networks, either formally or informally, when addressing common challenges and pursuing common opportunities. So what are the two big advantages in clustering? You have co-location. Now there are two different cluster systems. You can have clustering by product, okay? And that's the kind of, the few that we have in Nigeria seems to be in that way. So when we did the agricultural value chain, so there are some crops that we identified. So you now have farmers concentrated along all those crops, okay? So to enhance value, to enhance scale. So that is crop based. Then there can, that is crop based and location based. They are all together in the same geospatial location. But you can also have crop based clustering, whereby the farmers, the smallholder farmers, may not be located in the same place, but they are all producing the same product. So that way you can both consolidate and then achieve a high market presence and also investment in technology and in quality. Okay, so those are the two ways of clustering: geospatial clustering and crop-based clustering. Okay, so we intend to achieve co-location. They're all together. Now that will also attract processors, attract input suppliers, attract end users, off-takers. So all of these people coming together within that cluster. And that is the distinctive feature of clusters that give them their competitive advantage. So that is what we call agglomeration economies, because the inputs are within the location, the outputs are also taken or off taken within that location. So they don't need, so it solves the logistic problem. Okay, and then it also leads to very good specialization and efficiency of scale production and division of labor, such that you will have those whose job is simply to offtake what is produced within the cluster and put it in the international market. So that becomes their responsibility. You now have the financing and everything co-located within the same pressing. As you could see, now this is the case in Biobío district in Chile. Okay, so berry farmers, entrepreneurs, house owners, extensionists, and other actors have woven a value network in this region. They produce flowers and blueberry. And over a very short period of time, they've actually overrun the United States market, other markets in Europe, and in North America as well. Now, this is the concept of an ideal agri-cluster value network. So you have everybody located within this system, okay? So you have the wholesalers, you have importers, you have support service providers, you have the agro-processors, you have common facility, production input suppliers, and financials and everything. So you have vertical integration, you have horizontal integration, all located within the same geospatial place, which removes all the obstacles, impediments of transportation of logistics. Okay, so these are examples in Latin America. We have the wine clusters, which you find all over Latin America, in Peru, in Bolivia, Brazil, Paraguay, Argentina, Chile, Uruguay. And then you have the fruit clusters as well, all distributed all over Latin America. Putting it in context, so you can see what happens there. Everybody co-located. Okay, so you have the starch processors are within here. This is a fruit cluster. Both the end users. Okay, so if you look at it at both ends, everybody is located here. The root producers, root traders. And then if you have fish and pig raisers, why? Because they collect the residues to feed those animals. Then motors processors, candy manufacturers, consumers, everybody located. Now the question is, how do we start on this journey of clustering our agribusiness value chain in Nigeria? What we have done so far is the Anchor Borrowers Program, which has some element of clustering. But then all the elements are not yet together. And that is where we are proposing to work with the Federal Ministry of Agriculture, with the Central Bank, because we've done a lot of research on in all of this, so that we can provide the framework to ensure that we have operational and efficient clusters all over Nigeria. And that's where we need to do. And once we do that, definitely we will immediately begin to achieve our export advantage, increase our reviewed comparative advantage, and then also improve our export profile in agribusiness value chain. Thank you very much. I will take your questions at the end, but now let's go back to Dr. Kelikume's presentation. Okay, Ike, you can now share your slide. Back to you.
I'm trying to share that slide. I'm coming. Can you see it now?
Not yet.
What's happening?
Okay, send it to me by email. Let me share it for you from here.
No, where has it?
Okay, where can you share it?
I don't know why it's not sharing from here.
Don't worry, maybe it's technology, it happens. Okay, can you share the slide?
I couldn't share it either, I tried.
Can you send it to me by email right away?
I'll do that.
please.
You have it in your mail.
No, I couldn't find it. You said you sent it to me, but I couldn't find it. That's fine. That's fine. We're good. Okay, so okay, you can give us some questions we can be addressing while we're resolving this, so that we don't have any break in transmission. Okay, get us some questions that we can take on.
Okay. We have a lot of farmers in Nigeria, but very little mechanization in our agricultural sector. Lack of mechanization is part of the reasons why the yield in agricultural products is low year in, year out. How can farmers get tractors and other farm machines, even if they have to pay in installments? Is there any mechanism in place to encourage farmers to embrace mechanized farming?
Okay, Dr. Babandi, would you want to address this matter? It's on mechanization. I think there are some programs on that from the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. I know that Bank of Industry is also doing something. So, but let's hear from you first, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. Let me welcome all the other participants, including the panelists. And if I may take, I don't know whether I'm loud enough. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
We can hear you clearly. You are good.
Okay, okay, thank you very much. I think the question of mechanization cannot be dealt with independent of all other issues militating against the successful production or business in agriculture. Mechanization is just one. I know we addressed the issue of credit, which is one of the main issues that people are experiencing and they are clamoring for. For me, if it is for this post-COVID, we need to look at it holistically. What are the things that we need to do as a people to promote agriculture, even beyond the COVID-19 pandemic, and including what is there in credit, facilities, delivery, and also, I think the person is back. Are we pausing or we are continuing?
Yeah, I'm back. Can you see it now? Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you and we see your slide. But let's finish with Dr. Babandi, then you continue. Dr. Babandi, please continue.
Yeah, so what I want to put on the table is actually that we have to have a holistic view of agriculture and agribusiness. And then we isolate those areas, because if you look at it, agriculture, we are treating it as a culture, not as a business. So we have to start looking at agriculture and look at that culture and put business sense into it, so that we know what we need to bring about to attract investments into those businesses. Therefore, we have to develop business modules that will allow people to come into agriculture, put their own money. Okay, so even mechanization, if we say that, okay, what will government do? This idea of the PPP, I thought that maybe in the area of the PPP, we have to create PPP along the value chain. PPP in production, PPP in post-harvest management, in other words, the value addition, PPP in the marketing of products, because we need to do everything simultaneously and completely and together. Now, if you isolate only mechanization for which subsector? Is it the crop subsector? Is it the fishery subsector? Is it the agro-processing? Everything needs mechanization. Okay, but you have just talked about the parcels of farmland that are there. We need to cluster people together to start with, because mechanization can only be effective when we have a scale, where a group of farmers can own maybe a tractor. So in fact, this clustering that you have just mentioned is the way to go. We need to activate our cooperative societies, bring farmers together, other commodity-based together, commodity interest groups. The two things that you isolated and said that, okay, these are I think I noted it, the land-based, the cooperatives, clusters, yes. The two, I don't know where I jotted them. Those two groups of the clusters.
Yeah, I talked about the geospatial clustering and the crop-based clustering.
Yeah, crop-based and then the land-based clustering. Okay, these are the issues. You can get the cluster, then you know the appropriate mechanization that you are talking about, so that you can deploy the appropriate mechanization. When I'm going to talk about it holistically, I think I will make an issue to address this question properly, so that we allow the other presenter to continue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Babandi. Now back to you, Kelikume, please.
So apologies for the breakdown, technology failure. So sorry.
Accepted. Go ahead, sir.
So if you look at where I stopped, I was talking about the share of the labor force employed in the agricultural sector. And I alluded to the fact that when you have more people, more of your labor force engaged in agric, it simply means that your country is poor. So if you look at the data I have down, the bar chart down, you see USA is number one, having 1.66% of our labor force engaged in the agricultural sector, whilst you have Canada, South Africa, 5.5%. And you're looking at Nigeria and Chad. Nigeria, Chad, and India. The one that you're not seeing is India, 42.74% of our labor force is in the Greek sector. So all of this shows that for you to actually move the agricultural sector up, you need real-time players to play in this space. We've been pursuing critical mass by funding SMEs. We should begin to look at how do we aggregate multinational firms, the likes of Ollams, the likes of Watcott, these massive multinational firms that have deep pockets to come into the agricultural sector. So one of the things I said again about why the focus on the agricultural sector is the dimension and the structure, current structure of the agricultural sector. Agric is dimensioned into 4 sectors: crop, livestock, forestry, and fishing. Interestingly, when you look at the distribution, you find crop taking 89%. 89% of agric GDP, whilst livestock is doing 8%. And you find forestry doing 1% and fishery doing 2%. So it tells you one thing: 50% of our produce is lost. If you look at crop, 89% of your GDP. Agric GDP is 25.16%. If you look at agric sector contribution to GDP. However, when you look at it in terms of growth, the reasons why people want to enter this sector is that the sector is attractive. The sector can pull people there. And an attractive sector is a sector that is posting positive GDP growth. When you look at the current growth over the last 10 years of our agricultural sector, it's been lagging between 2 and 2.3%, which shows that there's a problem in terms of pushing and pulling this sector up. So again, why focus on the sector? We've actually alluded to the fact that over 80% of our export is in the oil and gas sector. And you can see the nosedive. So if you look at the charts, the bunny light, you look at the chart, when we were doing $25.8 per barrel, we were in recession. Today we are doing less than $25 per barrel, meaning that we are heading back into that same crisis. Now, during that recession, agric sector actually sustained the Nigerian economy. But the dynamics has actually changed. With that recession, there was no lockdown. There was no shutdown of hotels. The airport was not shut down. Most eateries were not shut down. Interstates were not on lockdown. Today, all of those things have happened. And you find that the disruption of the supply chain, the food supply chain, is likely to affect the agricultural sector in the 3rd and 4th quarter of 2020, signaling that it's not all rosy for that sector that held the country together during the last crisis. So you can see the charts. We were in recession. The service sector was in recession. The industrial sector was in recession. The agricultural sector, which is the bar chart, was actually not in recession. But when you look at where we are today, the Q2, Q3, Q4, there is the possibility that we're likely to go, that sector is likely to go down. And if that sector goes down, we are in trouble. The reason is that we've missed the first, agric, especially the upstream. I just showed you the statistics, that 89% is in the crop sector. And for crop sector, there's a planting season, there's a harvest season. The first quarter of 2020 is supposed to be the planting season. What we've seen this year is that the rains delayed in coming. Then we added the shutdown to it. It means that we've missed the first window of the planting season. So we're going to see the impact at harvest, which is Q4 and Q1 2020, meaning there's likely to be scarcity, there's likely to be spike in the prices of agri products. All of these are the negative impact of COVID-19. So what we find is speculative buying. When it all started with speculative buying, the shutdown in schools and hotels, recreation centers, and all of this that I've alluded to actually created one terrible cycle in the allowing us to miss the first planting cycle. So the shortfall in production commodities at harvest, we have scarcity and rising food price in the last quarter, which I just talked about. Now, interestingly, the first quarter of the year is the period in which the cocoa farmer and the cashew farmer actually exports their produce, especially in the month of January and February. So what happened this year is that it was difficult for cashew farmers to export anything. So all those that have exposed themselves by way of borrowing from the bank to finance cashew export are actually in crisis today. So again, we take you now to state competitiveness. Bongo has actually looked at the cluster, which I'm going to talk about briefly. So the current low price of crude oil has again exposed Nigeria to the Dutch disease syndrome. Many analysts are of the view that agriculture and agribusiness holds the key to unbundling the Nigerian economy. With low crude oil price, falling external reserves, weak naira, declining FGN allocation to states, most states in Nigeria will channel resources. In fact, they're all waking up now. All states are waking up to channeling resources to the agricultural sector. But first, these states must be prepared to answer some questions, some fundamental questions before venturing into the agricultural sector. Each state must first understand the current structure of the agricultural agribusiness value chain in Nigeria. Each state must clearly define their role and make a business case for investing in agricultural sector. If you do not make a business case, you're likely to run into murky waters. So agricultural sector is so structured, like I said initially, into 4 sectors. And you can see the spike: crop production, livestock, forestry, fishing. So all these dynamics is showing that there's room for improvement in livestock, there's room for improvement in forestry, there's room for improvement in fishing. However, if you decide to plant trees today, there are some trees that have a life cycle gestation of about 20, 30, 40 years. No individual will want to plant trees. For example, most of us that are going into the agri space, we enter this space at retirement, at the point where we are no longer active, at the point where we are tired. So most people enter at 55, they enter at 60. So when you enter this sector at that age, you're likely to run into trouble. When you begin to plant trees, economic trees at that age, you are probably planting for the next generation, because some of these trees, the timbers, the mahoganies of this world, the avinga, that's the ogbono tree, takes close to 25, 30, 40, 50 years, and they can live for 200 years. It is only the government that can actually venture into such projects. That's why you see all over us, you see deforestation. We've chopped down all our trees, and we're exposing ourselves by chopping down our trees. So each state must figure out where their strength lies in the agriculture and the agri-value chain. Each state must understand that their role is to create an enabling environment for private sector to operate in the agri space. Government role is to guarantee safety of private property and maintain rule of law. Each state government must ensure that that they close the infrastructure gap in the states to attract large multinational firms in the sector. If you look at the rice sector, for example, you find out that over 80% of the players in rice paddy are small-scale farmers, whilst the 20%, they wait at the processing end to take up the paddy. Now, these 20% are the multinational firms waiting to take the rice paddy. So we need to flip the picture the other way. For the 80% to be in that space where they produce the rice paddy, and the 20% to be in the processing space. Government must make policies that will protect farmers operating in the volatile upstream value chain of the agricultural sector. It is not compulsory that states must invest directly in the upstream sector. So what I'm saying here, it is not compulsory that states must go into large-scale farming. It is not compulsory that states must go into planting. It is not compulsory that states must begin to plant maize, that the government must begin to plant maize. But it is compulsory for the government to create that infrastructure, that enabling environment for the private sector to go in. A state may be better off investing in agro-tourism or in storage and warehousing facility than in just the agri space. I'll give us an example. Many state governors in the previous dispensation went to Songhai, Benin Republic, and cloned the Songhai initiative. So we had the Lagos Songhai farm, we had the Port Harcourt Songhai, we had the Kwara, we had the Songhai farms in Kwara. All these massive projects that the state government pumped in their funds were actually wasted projects because these projects did not amount to anything. Today, the Lagos State project is just there. The Songhai initiative is a failed initiative. So state government should begin to look inward to say, what is our strength? Where should we play in this value chain? How do we begin to encourage more private sector entities to play in this space than for state government to go directly into the sector? So states and lending institutions must understand that the missing link in the agribusiness and agricultural sector is not money. This is the narrative today. The narrative is push more fund, push more money, increase credit to the agricultural sector. The missing link is not money. The missing link is lack of in-depth knowledge of the sector. People wake up from sleep and they believe that they can just go and plant. They believe that they can just jump into this space. The truth is that agriculture and agribusiness is 70% science, 20% experiential learning, and 10% art. If you do not know the scientific part of agriculture, you will just waste your money. Without significant investment in knowledge, innovation, technical change, the sector growth and productivity will remain very low. I want us to take questions. I'll break at this point to answer some of your questions before moving to the next part of my slide. So can we take questions?
Okay, this question is to Bank of Industry. Wheat is a major imported crop in Nigeria that can be substituted with HQCF. With most of the value chain stakeholders in the entire wheat stock HQCF bread production, what is the bank doing to enable processors sell HQCF to flour millers?
So that question you are addressing to the banks, it is not what will the banks or what exactly the banks are doing. The question is, what are the private sector doing? Have we made a business case for high quality cassava flour? The banks are in business to make money. The banks will want to put their money where they will get returns. If you have not made a business case, I will not invest my fund in your project. The truth about farmers is that 80% of the operators, the SMEs, the small scale farmers, do not have a business structure. What you find is that they wake up from sleep and they say, I want to go into farming. They do not have a business structure. They don't have accounting practice. They don't keep their record. They don't have a payment platform where the banks can see that you're channeling your funds to. They wake up from sleep and say the banks will lend money to us. The truth about agriculture is that you do not experiment with other people's funds. Agriculture has something to do with experience. Agriculture has something to do with the multiplier principle. If I plant 1,000 plantain sucker this year, by next year, it is going to produce 6 times 1,000 sucker. It will give me 6,000 sucker. By the time I am harvesting 6,000 extra sucker, that probably will be the time for expansion, where I will approach my bank to say, I have made some gains and I need finance. I now understand this business. But a situation where a small-time player wakes up from sleep and says, I have discovered that I want to go into high-quality cassava flour. I need you to give me 10 million. It doesn't work that way. We need you to go in with your fund. We need you to experience this business. We need you to begin to think about expansion. By the time your books are good and it is not cooked up, the banks will give you fund. Because there's so much money out there chasing agri, but there are so few people that have structures in place. So I think the question is not about the banks, what the banks are doing. The banks are looking for channels to put their fund. The question is, the people who are in this sector lack the knowledge and wherewithal to expand the space. So we need you to begin to think, how do I acquire this knowledge? Where do I acquire this knowledge? How do I get mentorship? How do I get connected to farmers that are already integrating? IITA has done wonderful work in the high quality cassava flour in innovation. Done so much, but yet not.
I be conscious of the time, because so that we can work according to the time.
I think I've answered that question.
Okay, you've done the question. So go back to your slides, complete your presentation so that we can move as we planned, please.
Okay. So I take you to the next, the next part of the slide is looking at state competitiveness. So given the time constraint, it will be difficult to look at all the sectors. So I specifically picked three sectors. There are some states that are going into oil palm cultivation today. Some states are going into sesame. Some states are going into, other kinds of products. Sesame seeds, sesame oil. While some states, like Kebbi State, is neck deep in the rice value chain. So I'm going to explain how difficult it is for players to play in this space, especially states that are thinking of earning export revenue by going into this space. So states and financial institutions planning to invest in this sector should pay attention to the competitiveness of the commodities they are trying to attract. States championing a return to 1960, where Nigeria was the world's leading palm oil exporter, should look at the numbers again. As at 1960, when Nigeria, you know the story, there's this myth that the Malaysians came to Nigeria. We share this in the academic world. Malaysians came to Africa, they came to Nigeria. In fact, they got to Nkomu, took our oil palm seedling, took it back, and today they are one of the biggest producers of palm oil. That is one myth that I want to debunk here. So the reason is that globally, Nigeria is not competitive. It is not because they came and took our palm oil and developed it. You see the number, you see the statistics to know why this is so. So Nigeria is actually not competitive in playing at the global space. Let's see what the number is actually saying. Now, this is our major traded exports. The last figures released by National Bureau of Statistics. If you look at the major traded exports, you are going to see sesame, you're going to see good fermented cocoa, which is the second, you're going to see frozen shrimps, then you see sesame oil, you see cashew nuts. This is the major 5 exports. Then when you look at the import side of the divide, you will see the one I colored red is crude palm oil. You see that Nigeria imported palm oil from Malaysia, from Singapore, and from India. Now, some people will ask, what kind of palm oil did they import? It will interest you to know that the vegetable oil which you buy from the market, is actually bleached palm oil. So these countries have added value to palm oil, repackaged it by way of bringing in margarine, bringing in bleached palm oil, and that is what we consume. So when you look at these figures, you will see that Nigeria in 2019 actually imported palm oil. But take you back memory lane. Indonesia, Malaysia, Nigeria. Look at our yield per hectare and look at our production per ton and look at the trend from 1961 to 2018. Can you see Nigeria? Nigeria started out by producing 6.7 million tons in 1961. By 2018, we had produced very similar to what we did in 1961, 7.85 million metric tons. Then look at Malaysia and Indonesia. Nigeria started way better than Indonesia, started way better than Malaysia. Indonesia posted 115.2 million metric tons in 2018, whilst Malaysia did 98.4 million metric tons. Now go back to the other narrative, which is the yield tons. The yield here is converted to tons per hectare. You will see that Nigeria did 2.5 tons per hectare in 1961. By 2018, Nigeria is barely increased by 0.8%, doing 2.58 tons per hectare. Then you look at the likes of Indonesia and Malaysia. They actually started better than Nigeria in 1961. The yield for Malaysia was 11.55 tons per hectare, whilst that of Indonesia was 13.36 per hectare. Over the years, they improved their yield to 16.59 and 16.44%. So what does this tell us? If you're going to produce, Indonesia and Malaysia are doing how many times? Almost 100 times more than what Nigeria is doing. Nigeria cannot compete in the international space. What's the implication of this data to the government? If you open your borders, if you do not place embargo or restriction on palm oil related products coming into the market, you definitely create dumping. No matter the synergy, the amount of money that central bank is dishing out, no matter the amount of fund that NISRAL is pushing to a wonderful project in the palm value chain, if your aim is to export, you certainly will not make it because these other products are highly competitive and they will push your product under. This explains why Nigeria is currently importing palm oil related products. However, if we must make headway in this, Nigeria and the government of Nigeria must begin to look at this critically to say we need to protect the home industry. Because when you look at the palm value chain, you can see the value chain here. The palm is so diverse that you have palm kernel cake, palm kernel oil, palm kernel shell, you have fuel, you have charcoal, you have animal feed, you have food production for cosmetic and pharmaceuticals, you have biokerosene, but you have glycerol for soap making. Now, our palm industry can actually service these industries if only we can block the foreign product from coming in. And that's the only way we can actually make headway in the agricultural, in the palm value chain, excuse me. So this explains why Nigeria actually imported palm. So for states that are actually venturing into palm, we need to look critically at this number. We need to think of how to do what? Protect the domestic market from aggressive foreign importers. What this tells us is that it pays for you to actually import and not to produce. Remember that it will take you between 6 and 7 years when you plant today to begin to harvest. Then we take you to the rice value chain. This is where Kebbi is playing, and you will see what the number is actually saying. 1961, Nigeria started badly. Nigeria was lower than India and lower than China in terms of our yield per hectare. As of 2018, the average, I'm not looking at what Kebbi is doing, we are taking the average statistics. The average yield for rice in Nigeria is 2.04 tons per hectare. So I can confidently say, our governor is here listening, I can confidently say that Kebbi has actually done above. If you single out Kebbi and some states, due to good agricultural practice, they've actually shot the yield higher than what you see when you look at the average yield for India. India is doing 3.88 tons per hectare, whilst China is highly competitive in the production of rice.
Okay, you have 5 more minutes.
Okay, okay. So again, when you look at rice paddy, this is where Nigeria is not competitive. When you look at rice paddy production, these countries have gone so far. China is doing 214 million tons per annum, whilst India is doing 172.5 million tons. Nigeria is barely doing 6.8 million tons per annum. So in other words, it is easier for this Chinese rice, the Indian rice, the Thai rice, to find its way through our borders and enter your market. It is cheaper for this rice to come in. So this is why government, especially state government venturing into rice, must begin to look at how do we protect this ailing industry? How do we protect this young, dynamic industry? So I'll quickly take you to the next one. This is the rice paddy value chain that Bongo alluded to, that Bongo talked about, where you look at the network of interconnected activities taking place in the sector. So when you look at sesame, this is where Nigeria is actually playing. This is where Nigeria is currently on top. Sesame is the highest brand in terms of what we are currently exporting. The good news about sesame is that there are two countries actually stands out in the cultivation and production of sesame, Nigeria and Tanzania. You can see how closely related their yield per tons per hectare is, 0.98 and 0.96 for Nigeria. In terms of production, Nigeria is actually number 5 when you look at Tanzania as number 1. Nigeria is currently producing 488,000 tons. So if you look at the first 5 countries, Nigeria is there. However, in terms of export, Nigeria actually exports her sesame oil and her sesame. They actually export it almost raw to India, to Turkey, and to Vietnam. So I'm going to skip this. This is again the network, the cluster formation. For those states that are going into sesame, this is what they should begin to think about. How do we bring in a network of interconnecting activities? How do we set up a hub? This hub will begin to link processors, agri-cluster, research institutes, government initiative, fertilizer. How do we bring all of this as a synergy in one spot? So this is what Bongo talked about. But however, we need to digress a bit to look at state competitiveness in Nigeria. You can see some crops actually stands out. So what I did was to dimension the strength of each state in terms of the geopolitical zone. So when you look at Northwest, you will see cassava, cowpea, cotton, dairy products, economic trees, date palm. So all of these are the things that you find in Northwest. So where you have the likes of Kaduna, Kebbi. So one thing that stands out in this state is ginger in terms of exports. Is ginger. Nigeria has one of the best ginger. Nigeria is number 1 in the production of cassava. So when you look across the value chain, you will see cassava appearing in Northwest, in Northeast, in North Central, in South-South, in Southeast, and in Southwest. Same thing, when you look across this value chain, you will see sesame appear in Northwest, in Northeast, in North Central. So there are some crops that stands out. So if you want to produce, you probably look at your ecological zone and your geographical zone, and you say, this is where you are going to produce. If you see one thing that stands out in all of this is cassava. Cassava is so rich. Nigeria is number 1 in the production of cassava. However, 80% of what Nigeria is currently doing in the cassava value chain is gari, fufu, and eba. The remaining 20% are the few SMEs, the few small-time firms that are gradually integrating into ethanol, gradually integrating into industrial starch. However, because of the uncompetitiveness of Nigerian starch, Nigeria is still importing starch from China. So Nigeria has a very rich arable soil for agricultural cultivation. The country is also blessed.
Okay, Ike, you may now conclude, please.
Right. So that's the end of my slide. So efforts made by CBN, by the Nigerian Incentive-Based Risk Sharing System for Agriculture, that's NISRA, the Federal Ministry of Agri, the bankers, Nigerian Bankers Committee, and various donor agencies is commendable. But despite massive funding that has gone into the sector, the current operating environment is not encouraging large corporate firms to invest in the upstream value chain. The truth is that without the upstream value chain, there is no midstream and there is no downstream. Without significant investment, without an altruistic, significant investment by all stakeholders in the upstream value chain, Nigeria will continue to rely on crude oil. So without significant investment in the sector, Nigeria will face an uphill task in feeding our population. It is important that states make a business case by encouraging cluster formation and farmers' cooperative initiative to drive productivity. Thank you very much, and I'll take your questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. If we were in a physical location, I think we will give you a resounding round of applause, Dr. Kelikume. That's a wonderful presentation that has covered all the dimensions of the problems, the opportunities, the challenges, the risks, and then possible strategies that we can deploy to make agribusiness work for us. Thank you once again. All right, so I think let's take just 2 questions. Now, after those 2 questions, we go to the presentation by the Bank of Industry. Okay, Okwe, please.
Okay. What is the status of Lagos and Kebbi State partnership on lake rice? Lessons learned and model for other subnationals.
I think our Excellency would better fit to answer that question.
Thank you.
Yes, so we give it to His Excellency. He's still with us.
Thank you. Okay, well done, Dr. Kelikume, on that wonderful presentation. Safe to say that, before I answer the question, one of the lessons is that Kebbi State achieved, and indeed other states, a number of other places, we achieved these significantly higher and comparative yields in a short time because of the investment that has been coming in. Meaning, if we invest in our agriculture, we get higher yields, even within a short time. You rightly said that 80% of agriculture is science. And indeed, the science, better seedlings, adequate inputs, bright agronomic practices will see a doubling, quadrupling of yields in many crops across the country. Now back to the question. The lake rice has been a very, very successful partnership because what was behind it was the decision by the Lagos State government and Kebbi State government to demonstrate that a Nigerian crop, 2 Nigerian states can jointly demonstrate the ability to produce, process, and market a Nigerian crop that will ensure that it meets the quality test everywhere in the world. Because Lagos is a very critical market. If something does not work, they will ensure that they say so. And so because of that partnership, we have seen increase in confidence in Nigerian rice generally. which was our objective, because Lagos State and Kebbi State did not aim to dominate or to be marketers or producers of rice alone. We are enablers. We wanted to demonstrate that it's possible, and we're very happy that we have demonstrated, and today Nigerian rice is accepted by Nigerians, and for the right reason, that it's comparable in quality to the very best in the world, while still we are producing lake rice for the specialty market we are producing for. So the lesson is that for many crops, there are opportunities for states to partner or clusters to be developed in order to enable, to demonstrate that they can work, because most of these have suffered historic lack underinvestment. So with little investment, and we must thank again the central bank, NISAL, yes, NISAL, I forgot them earlier, Bank of Agriculture, Bank of Industry. They have taken up this challenge seriously, and they are demonstrating that this things can work. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Your Excellency. It's a pleasure to listen to you.
Thank you.
One of the practical steps that have been taken, something that is working. All right, so let us go back to the presentation now by the Bank of Industry. So Leonard, if you're ready, please let us listen to you. And you are to speak on the innovative financial options that are available for agribusiness. Okay, Kelikume, could you please take off your slides so that Leonard can share his? Hello, Ike. Hello, Leonard, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so we are ready for you.
Okay, now I'm not sure I'll be able to share my slides. I thought your team was going to put up the slides.
Okay, no problem. We have your slide. We can also put it up. No problem at all.
Yeah, it's not much.
Put it up from my end.
Yeah, it's just 3 slides.
Yes, yes. So no problem. I'm going to put it up in a moment, but you can start speaking. Yeah.
Okay, so His Excellency, the Governor of Kebbi State, Governor Atiku Bagudu, my fellow presenters, and ladies and gentlemen, my task today is very, very simple, is to share Bank of Industry's agribusiness financing options. So we can go to the next slide, please. So Bank of Industry is Nigeria's oldest and largest and the most successful development finance institution. The bank was 60 years old last year. We have garnered a lot of experience in supporting industry at all levels. Our mandate is to transform Nigeria's industrial sector by providing financial and advisory support for companies at all levels of the economy, large, medium, small, and even micro enterprises. We provide support for expansion, diversification, rehabilitation, modernization of existing enterprises. Projects that attract the bank that we particularly support are projects that will help to generate multiplier effects like job creation, import substitution, poverty alleviation, diversifying the economy, looking at emerging subsectors and supporting, like in the creative sector, for instance, another sector that we support very actively. Agro-processing and agribusiness is a key sector that the bank supports. The previous speakers have already done, including His Excellency the Governor, full justice to the importance of agriculture to the economy from the point of view of GDP contribution, employment, food security, economic diversification, export earnings, etc. So I will not go into any of that for now because that's already been addressed. I will focus more on what the bank is doing in terms of the financing options that are available. I will also talk about our track record in this sector, what we have done so far in terms of loans to the various categories, etc. And also talk about some initiatives that the bank is doing that will help to transform this sector. In terms of the financing that is available, the bank provides loans at concessionary rates and concessionary terms. We provide long-term loans, sometimes between 5 to 7 to 8 years in terms of tenor, with moratoriums ranging depending on the nature of the project up to 18 months, etc. We also provide working capital at the interest rates is usually either single digit or if it's double digit, it's about 10%. We also provide working capital facilities as well. Our working capital facilities are for a tenor of 3.5 years with a moratorium of 6 months as well. And the interest rate is also quite favorable for support for the industries that benefit. We also provide support to smallholder farmers and clusters. This is actually born out of the need for the bank to address the entire value chain of the agro sector, because we believe that if you focus only on one part of the chain and you neglect the others, then you are not doing justice to the holistic and comprehensive support that is required. Because if you focus on processing, what about the raw material input that comes in? How do you address that? What about the off-takers? How do you address that aspect as well? You know, so this is why it's very important for the bank to cover the entire value chain. And so what we do is we look at the smallholder farmer clusters. We focus on the large corporations like Nigeria Flour Mills, like Olam, etc. Then we also look at aggregators, we look at processors and other manufacturers to ensure to help them to ring fence their raw material, their material input. We provide the financing to them at favorable rates, which they now on-lend to the smallholder farmers. At the end of the production, the produce is then part of it is provided to the aggregator or the manufacturer. They go ahead and process. The other part is retained by the smallholder farmer, and they usually will store it and wait until it's in the off season, and then they sell it and make some good profit. That way we help to generate value for them, value creation and wealth creation for them. And this slide talks about the amounts and in terms of support that has been provided by the bank over the last 5 years. Agro-processing, for instance, the non-food part, about 87 billion has been disbursed so far to support industries in this sector. Food processing, 104 billion has also been disbursed so far to support industries in this sector. And you can see the statistics with respect to the smallholder farmers here as well. Number of enterprises supported is about, in the smallholder cluster, is about 18,300 so far. There are some other transactions that we're working on now that will actually triple this number as we speak right now, with quite a number of the large corporations that operate in the country today. The crops that we support in this initial stage is rice as well as maize. Those are the two crops that we're supporting. We're also looking at other crops as well. There is also some collaborations that we do, which is one, the central bank initiative with the federal government. It's called the Textile Revival Implementation Fund. We all know the importance of the textile industry. At one point, that was one of the biggest employers of labor in the country, you know. But we know the story of how the textile industry is now almost completely dead. What the central bank has been doing, which should require a lot of commendation on their part, is to provide support to ensure that we revive this important sector. And how do we do? How is it being done? It's a collaboration between the central bank and the Bank of Industry to put together a financing scheme that addresses the entire value chain. We call it from farm to fashion. That is how we look at it. So we provide financing for the cotton seeds. We provide financing for the cotton when it's ready. We provide financing for processing of the cotton into the lint as well as the textiles, and then to the garments as well. So that is how the bank is able to do that. Somebody made a mention that when money comes from a Bank of Industry or any other government agency, people look at it as a grant. What the scheme that we have developed ensures that we do not fall into that trap. We do not disburse money directly. What we do is we provide the inputs at the various stages of the value chain, and that is how the payment is made. Now, at the end of the value chain, you say, what happens to the garments that are produced? The federal government has signed an agreement with the uniform companies, the uniform services, to offtake whatever is produced. So that way we have the complete value chain working. The next aspect where we hope to have a significant impact is the special agro-processing zone. This is a partnership that we're working on with the African Development Bank. There was a lot of this talk about aggregation, etc., and all of that, the ecosystem. So what the bank does is that, we have anchor tenants. We have these zones that are established. The entire value chain is in one location, as you know. So that way, you have the farmers, you have the processors, you have the off-takers, you provide the logistics, the infrastructure, etc. And all of this is provided at subsidized rate, so that way the final product comes out at an affordable rate and all that. The goal is to set up these special agro-processing zones in all over the country. We are starting with 6 so far, and then we'll continue to go from there. The supply financing product is to provide support for suppliers of input, and the distributor financing product is to provide support for the off-takers. There are 2 other things that the bank does that is very, very key. Somebody mentioned about capacity building. You know, the various players, particularly on the smaller level, not having the structures or the financial literacy or whatever to manage their success. This is one area that the bank takes very seriously, and we have been focusing on that. We have a group of business consultants. We call them business development specialists. There are over 200 spread across the country. What they do is that they will handhold all these, particularly the SMEs and the micro enterprises. They work with them, because as your business grows, you have to change your business model. They work with them to build governance, build the necessary structures, etc., financial literacy and all of that, so that they can manage their success and help them to grow significantly. And the good thing is that the bank pays their fees. It's not the SMEs that pay. The bank pays their fees to ensure that. The other aspect of the support the bank provides is advocacy. Because we are the implementing agency of government's policy with respect to industry, the bank advocates on behalf of our customers. We talk to them, what are the challenges you're facing, and then we sit down with the government to say, look, here is the mandate you have given us. We are working to achieve it. However, there are certain things that need to be done to ensure that these industries succeed, because financing is not the only part. There are other aspects as well. So this is what the bank does. I will stop now and await further questions. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Leonard, for the insightful presentation on what the Bank of Industry does to support agribusiness in Nigeria. I think that's comprehensive enough, even though it's short. Okay, just to save on time, let's just jump to Dr. Babandi. I would like you to, have a word, and then after that, we will take some questions.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, I want to start by appreciating His Excellency Dr. Atiku Bagudu, the Governor of Kebbi State, for his persistent interest in agriculture in Nigeria, and also appreciate all the participants and the panelists today. As a ministry, what we are expected to do is to listen very, very carefully to the different stakeholders, both private and public, with a view to isolating areas that the government needs to focus on in order to provide targeted support to the farmers and to the businesses along all the subsectors of agriculture, the crop subsector, the livestock subsector, the fisheries and the agroforestry, and vis-a-vis the value chain segments of production, value addition, and markets. I will be quick to say that one areas that in the value chain we miss, we normally don't talk about, is value extraction. Before we add value, we should start talking about extracting value. Most times, and somebody in, I think Dr. Kelikume mentioned the value chain of cassava, for example. Now, when you are into that cassava, before we don't extract maximum value on that crop, before we even talk about value addition. I don't know whether I'm being heard.
Oh yes, we are hearing you loud and clear.
Oh, very good. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
So what I mean by value extraction, I think Dr. Kelikume has mentioned it. We are just doing fufu, gari, and the like. And then ethanol and industrial starch and so many other components that could be extracted from cassava are left there. Now, value addition, for example, is like fortification of some of those products. You add value to that. You have already extracted it, and then you add value when you fortify it, like fortifying with vitamin C and the rest of those things. I think we need to, and there's business sense in even value addition or fortification or in those areas. Now, moving forward, accordingly, what I was able to isolate so far is starting with His Excellency when he talked about let's talk less and do more about agriculture and agribusiness. I noted that because definitely this is not the first time we are talking about agriculture. We should have been talking about what we did and what we need to do more. So we need to talk less about the potentials and talk more about how to convert these potentials into realities. He also talked about to calibrate our policies to support agriculture and agribusiness. For example, this land border closure policy, we can clearly see the impact it has on, for example, rice. So we really need, and we agree that we need to calibrate our policies to support specific areas of agriculture that we need to look into. He talks about subsidizing agriculture, maybe similar to some of these richer countries. Yes, but the problem is we don't have a mechanism for subsidy delivery. At what point of agriculture do we, or what segment of agriculture do we start subsidizing so that we get some overlapping effects? We have tried, government will say, okay, let's subsidize fertilizer. It doesn't get to the beneficiaries. Do we subsidize at what segment of the value chain? Or do we have to do it all across? If so, how? And I think this will come if, for example, we do what, again, I think all the speakers agree that we have to do. We need to cluster, we need to know our farmers. We need to know the beneficiaries so that we can now target our subsidies and our support. In this, it means that we are looking at agriculture as a business. That is what is uniting us all here. So the issue is also, somebody has mentioned, these investments, you invest into a business. So you have to create a business for somebody to come and say he wants to invest. For example, people come and invest, buy shares into Dangote Cement, into so many of these, the breweries and every other place. So we have to consciously develop the business modules that will attract investors to come and put their own money, because the essence of an investor is putting his money so that he can make some profit and he can make some gains. So I think the next one, again, is talking about what do we have to do as a government, what do we have to do as the private people, what do we have to do together? Where do we start? And this COVID thing is the one that will direct us aright, because everybody has locked down, no supply. If we are, somebody asked, what do we do about the supply gap? People are not shifting or selling or exporting their own produce. They are preserving and conserving it for their own internal use. So what do we do? The right time is now for all of us to start thinking. Those people that are doing agriculture just for subsistence, they know that there's great opportunity to make money in agriculture, and the time is now. With the support of government, with the support of every other person, I think we need to explore this opportunity and convert it into realities. And I think I want to stop here. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Babandi, for, again, your great insights. Yes, so all hands must be on deck. I think that's the lesson for today. We have just 10 minutes left because we promised that we'll end by 12:30. There are so many questions, okay? And first of all, I need to thank all of us who have been faithful with us. You sign in at 10 o'clock and you are still with us. So we still have about 329 attendees. So at the point we got to 370, but I know that some people for other engagements have signed up, but we still have, you know, the bulk of 329 people still on with us here. Thank you very much for being patient. You know, this is very important. And I don't think that this is a discussion that will end, you know, today, because the questions that people are asking are very germane, very important questions. So many questions, okay? Very, you know, practical about how do we, you know, the strategies, and then some pointing out some of the challenges in the agribusiness value chain. Somebody mentioned about the textile industry. How do you fund the textile industry when they are still operating with very obsolete equipment and obsolete technology? A lot of questions, a lot of issues. So, and if we need to get it right, if we have to get it right, and we have to, this should be an ongoing conversation. So it's not just ending up at the level of conversation. We need to have it, you know, properly framed so that we can begin to develop design strategies that will take us out of where we are so that we can get to where we're intending to go to. So otherwise, I'm afraid that it will just continue to be one other, talk show. So at this point, I would like to welcome Engineer Chidi Izuwa, the Director General of the Infrastructure Concession and Regulatory Commission, who has been very gracious to put this together. In fact, we owe this to him. So it was his own idea that we need to bring the private sector and the public sector together to discuss these matters, because he knows how germane agriculture is to revitalize the economy that we have right now. So Dr. Engineer Izuwa, you have the time now, please. We are so grateful to you. Please, we need to hear from you.
Hello.
Hello, sir, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, well, first of all, I would like to, express my immense gratitude to His Excellency, Governor Atiku Bagudu, who is not just the governor of Kebbi, but also the vice chairman of the National Food Security Council. I spoke to him last night about this, and he's been with us. So, Governor, we really are grateful to you. I also want to thank all the partners, LBS, Bank of Industry, Bank of Agriculture, Nigerian Governors Forum, the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, the Minister, the Permanent Secretary for all the support. I'd just like to start with something His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari said in November 2019. Agriculture is Nigeria's veritable tool for economic recovery. It cannot be said any time better than now. We see what has happened to oil. We see what has happened to our national income structure. We are in a TINA situation. There is no alternative. And frankly, we are spoiled for choice. We have the lessons from Brazil, from Netherlands. Netherlands as a country, Nigeria is 22 times the size of Netherlands. But Netherlands earns about 90 billion euros in agri-export revenues. Netherlands is able to grow 100 kg of tomatoes per square meter. So I mean, we have lessons from there, Bangladesh. But so really what we should do is we shouldn't copy and paste, because copy and paste is imitation. What we should do is we should just copy, mix and paste. And that's what innovation is. And in terms of what PPPs is done in Nigeria, we've done the silos concession, which has been very successful and is going to, I mean, the grains that we have, we're able to store them. We've also done some things with the ministry in farm mechanization. That needs to be done more, because back-breaking agriculture will not take us to where we want. We need to sort of have mechanized agriculture that will give us the yields we're looking at. We also need to work on irrigation. I mean, all the multi-purpose dams in Nigeria have huge potential for PPPs in irrigation, in agriculture, etc. We need to do staple crop processing zones. We need to do agro-industrial parks. Now, we have had problems with PPPs in Nigeria in the past, which is around, project development funding to create the bankable project, and also the length of the project. Dr. Bongo, you will recall I sent you the slides on the silos, and I said, don't look at the timing. Taking 4 years to deliver a PPP project, it's not acceptable in the new world. There's no time to waste. So we in the ICRC are working on quick ways, to see how we can shorten delivery time and make sure these, projects work. But I think the wake-up call for all of us is that it is time, for us to come together, because, with the COVID situation, with the, global demand and supply shocks, is an opportunity. If you look at what other countries are doing from agriculture, it is time for us to re-image agriculture in our country and reap the full benefits. And I think something we've spoken very often on is the herders-farmers clashes. And what I always tell people is that the farmer-herders clash, it's an infrastructure problem. Nobody wants a cattle to walk from, Maiduguri to Port Harcourt before they eat meat. The first of all is the cattle is a lazy animal. It doesn't like to walk. It doesn't like to run. There's no cattle race anywhere in the world. There are camel races. So, but however, if we reimage our agriculture and we have ranches, farmers will be the one looking for headers because they would like to sell fodder to them. Fodder is very expensive. Then the productivity will go up. Look at our cattle today. They're only able to do 1 liter of milk per day, when other countries do 3 liters. By the time the cattle is straight from here, down to Port Harcourt, it's not able to, it's tired. The muscles are straightened. The beef quality is not very high. It won't be competitive internationally. So by reimaging our agriculture, bringing the public and the private to work together, we will create the future of our agriculture we want, and we will increase our national income. We will separate and create jobs for our people. and create happiness. I'm truly very excited at the number of attendees at this session today. And as we agreed, this is just the beginning of a process. Based on the feedback from today, we will look at the other sessions we will run. We have to have a laser focus on agriculture to be able to push our country. I just want to thank all the partners. I want to thank His Excellency, the Governor. I want to thank everybody who has participated. And I wish you well. I'm sorry, I asked your permission to remove my nose mask because I felt you could hear me better. Thank you very much. And I'm willing to take any questions that we need to take towards the end of it. Thank you, everybody. And God bless Nigeria. And God bless our president for what he has done. If we hadn't focused on agriculture, just imagine if we were not producing foodstuffs for ourselves and we were still importing massive volumes of rice, massive volumes of palm oil and everything, and we had COVID, where would Nigeria have been? So it's the right thing that the president is drawn us to that focus consistently to focus on agriculture. That's the real wealth of Nigeria, agriculture and our people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Engineer Izuwa, the DG of ICRC. Thank you immensely. We are really grateful to you for putting this together. Now, so we need to round it up. So last word, what are the next steps? Engineer Izuwa, you mentioned that we need to take feedback and then see what next that we need to do with this conversation. Is this something that should end with conversation? I understand that there's a presidential food agricultural committee that is at work. And then we are happy that His Excellency, who is a vice chairman of the committee, is also with us here. So, but given that this is a public, a private public interaction on agriculture, what do you think should be the next step?
I think, all the key partners are here. The Nigerian Economic Summit Group is here. So what we plan to do is, there are immediate things that need to be done, as of now. So those things have to be, done. And I think the governor, you said it at the National Food Security Council, what we are going to do is between ourselves. I apologize, I didn't mention the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, and I did mention the partners. I want to acknowledge them again. We're going to sort of, circulate, some sort of, quick actions, which will present to the National Food Security Council in terms of things to be done. Then subsequently, we're going to work with the ministry and all the stakeholders, and where are the specific areas so that this will go. Some of these presentations, some will go to the National Food Security Council, some will go to the Federal Executive Council in terms of rejigging our policies. So the key issue is to take inputs here, which is why if you watch, many of us, like myself and Ministry of Agriculture, we made no presentations because we felt it was formal, but very often we talk. It is time for us to sit back, get feedback so that, the policies you find are basically, supported by evidence and from practice. So, and I think based on that, we'll also have a second webinar, where we will give feedback on what has happened and take further feedback on the concern. So we need to draw up a plan of action that we need to move. Some of the things I've sketched around is around that, plan of action, which was part of the big picture that we drew up with the LBS and all the partners. The focus, and I think that is important. The focus is to sort of, reinvent and reimage agriculture. So that's our ultimate goal. Now, what are the steps that we need to take to do that? We'll go along here because the idea is not just to have talk. The idea is to see results. Results is money is in the hands of farmers, food on the table of Nigerians, and a prosperous nation that no longer has to depend on a cyclical product, like crude, to be able to survive.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. His Excellency, your final words so that we can conclude. It's now 12:30.
Well, thank you. Mr. President, who is the chairman of the National Food Security Council, have been very, very active in charting a course for Nigeria away from crude oil. Like I said, and we are lucky that he's somebody who knows crude oil very well. He was Minister of Petroleum. He knows the promises. He sees the opportunities that have been missed because way back when he was minister, he knew countries that were also crude oil producers, but they have done very well in agriculture. Evidence in the last 5 years show that we should do more, and discussion is happening. The central bank is very, very playing a great role mobilizing funding for the sector, the intervention programs, the Federal Ministry of Finance, the Federal Ministry of Agriculture. Even now, in the financing, in the loans they are seeking, a lot of it will go to support agriculture. I think we are on the same page that everyone agrees the key is to find that much money and mobilize the private sector. The great private sector participants have made unimaginable rates of return over the last 5 years. So if there's any motivation, that is it. And the government policy is steady. Banks and institutions, Bank of Agriculture, NISAL, Bank of Agriculture, Bank of Industry, they are all very active. So I think the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, Nigerian Agribusiness Group, and ICRC, I like the promise we have had from the Acting Director General that we will no longer have 4-year waiting period to concession, that because they are key. Some of the things we need to do requires private-public partnership. But I can assure you that the Nigerian agricultural space is well motivated, and the people of Nigeria, farmers of Nigeria, fishing communities, pastoralists, and other livestock participants are embracing the policies and opportunities, and we are seeing significant increase in yields and contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, His Excellency Governor Atiku Bagudu, the Governor of Kebbi State, the front on the agricultural revolution in Nigeria. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a long day. On that note, it's also my pleasure to thank you immensely for being at the end. We want to thank all the panelists, Dr. Babandi of the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, Mr. Leonard Kange of the Bank Industry, Mr. Bikoye of Bank of Agriculture also joined us, but for some reasons he couldn't speak as we wanted him to. He was trying to get to us, but I couldn't read his private text messages. And then, of course, I want to thank from the bottom of my heart, Dr. Ikechukwu Kelikume, the guru in business, a very enlightening and very entertaining presentation that he made to us. So he has pointed us in the right direction, you know, as well as debunking some of the myths that we've always held in agribusiness. Everybody jumps into agriculture without knowing that it is more of science than art. It's not something for the retirees as such. Okay, so we want to thank LBS. We want to thank all our partners. Dr. Zua has already, you know, extended our gratitude to them. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us, and we hope that you will all still join us when next we call upon you. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day, and please stay safe. Oh, hello, Dr. Kelikume, please go ahead. We are still here.
Okay, I actually want to thank all, and especially our dear governor. We thank you so much, and we hope to do this again. But in the interim, we want to actually tell our participants that some of the questions that they've raised, we probably address most of these questions in the classroom. We have programs coming up. We have an agribusiness course that addresses some of these problems that some of us are sharing here. For example, there's that question that says, how do we ensure that the government will go ahead and begin to build the needed banks, storage banks? And I answer that question by saying, it is not the role of the government. It is the private sector that will see that gap and take positions. After you've seen the gap, you take positions. So we have an agribusiness course that is so structured into three, it sits on a tripod where we look at critical thinking and understanding the agri-value chain. Then we take a second module which looks at entrepreneurial mindset, and a third module that actually talks about operational excellence. So it's a package that at the end, you come up with a business plan such that you can withstand any stress the banks will put you through. So it's not all about getting the finances, it's about preparing yourself to play actively in this sector. Once again, I thank all and thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you very much. So on that note, also,
Sorry,
yes,
Dr. Bongo.
Please go ahead, sir.
Hello, Dr. Bongo. Yeah, just a quick one. I want to assure all the participants that all the presentations and the link for the recording will be sent out to everybody. You know, and
Okay,
so,
thank you.
so that
Thank you.
we have a recording of this, and then it's going to be a valuable process for us to move, because I think we must realize that this is about the life and future of our country. It's about our ability. Today we cannot import food, because of the supply chain. So, this is national security. This is food security. It's about the future of our children. It's about their nutrition. It's about the ability to create a better Nigeria. So we must take this over serious, if I can be allowed to create that in that word. So just make sure we have your email address, everything, so we can send it.
Yes, as long as you registered, we have your contacts, and we'll be, we'll be sending you the slides and the recording. On top of that as well, Dr. Kelikume has mentioned the program that we have at LBS. We also have a very thriving program on PPPs and project finance and cluster management. So those are some of the things LBS has devoted attention to designing over the last couple of years. And we've also partnered with ICRC in delivering some of these programs, and we know that we'll continue to partner with them in the future. Once again, thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.